this computer, which is even weirder because you would
That is
think
weird.
Zoom is Zoom, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, you're paying for that one account, I would assume.
So I don't know what's going on. Okay, I think
Mhm.
we are live.
Okay.
So welcome everybody to our weekly Tuesday afternoon live stream. This week I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and with me is the lovely and talented Angie Atkinson. Angie, hello.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Awesome.
And so we decided that we were going to do something a little different today. Um, Angie has a question from somebody in the community. So, Angie, do you want to start off with the question and then we'll respond to it and then jump into the chat?
Absolutely. So this comes from someone you used to know, username.
Okay.
And the question is, when healing relationships with those broken during the time with the narcissist, how do you explain it? What you went through? Why you didn't walk away? What it has done and what it has caused for you? What it has done to you and what's caused for you. When we say things out loud, how obvious the manipulation and treatment is, and what we would say to others who are on the other side. Then the embarrassment, the guilt, and hurt set in, and they lace the conversation, having no understanding of how truly horrible it was and is. I want my life back, but I don't know how to tell people who haven't had a personal experience with narcissism in any aspect. So, how would you start out with that, Dana?
I think I would phrase it in terms of it's like being in a cult.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
Because I just unless you're in one of these relationships, it's difficult to understand the dynamic of how come you didn't see it or why would you let yourself be mistreated like that? Why didn't
Yep.
you just leave? And I think the closest thing that a person who hasn't experienced this can compare it to is a cult. So um and I would just keep it brief. I would just say, you know what? It was a very manipulative relationship, and I cannot believe how far I allowed myself to get pulled off track. You know, it wasn't intentional. I mean, nobody intentionally gets in or stays in an abusive relationship, just like nobody gets in and stays in a cult.
Right.
Um, and then once you finally realize something's really wrong, that's when you get out. So I would just kind of leave it like that. What
Yeah.
would you say?
I mean, I love the idea of comparing it to a cult, and I think um, I don't know, a year ago or something when we first got together. One of the things you said in the initial interview, which for those of you who don't know, I had interviewed Dana on my channel, and then we decided to keep going. um, and one of the things that you said was that being with a narcissist is like being in a cult. And I was really, that really clicked with me. And I actually ended up doing a couple of follow up videos on it because it was to me, such a profound concept. So, with that being said, I agree. I would definitely start there. Um, if someone could understand and try to explain the similarities. Psychological abuse is something that not a lot of people really wrap their head around because when you discuss individual instances of it, it's very difficult to help people understand the pervasiveness if they haven't been in a relationship with a narcissist. And in fact, often you even see people who have been in a relationship with a narcissist not understanding someone else because it seems so different than their own experience, even though if we wanted to we could draw many parallels, right?
Mhm.
So I'm with you on the cult thing. I think I would use the words psychological abuse, emotional abuse. I think I would most definitely try to explain gaslighting and how, what the concept is and how that person gaslighted me specifically. Um, I think I would start there as well. But the comparison, I mean, there's just really between a cult leader and a narcissist. I mean, so many direct parallels. One of the videos I did was that about those parallels, and I see a lot of that. So I think I would start there, and I wouldn't be afraid to show somebody a video that really resonated with you, or an article, um, because I think sometimes we doubt ourselves and we become kind of frustrated when people aren't hearing us. And so if we can say, okay, look, here's this is what I went through, because I don't know, but I'm sure you've experienced the same thing where people come in and say in your comments like, are you watching over my shoulder? How are you
Mhm.
describing my relationship, right? So in that case, if you find a video or an article or a podcast that resonates with you that way, I think that's a really smart way to help someone else understand, maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. To the level that they're curious.
Hmm.
The other thing I would kind of watch out for is, I guess, be prepared for them to just not understand. So, because it is, I mean, again, if we're taking this kind of cult-like approach to it, and the reason why it's so hard for even those of us that have been in these relationships to explain it or to even understand when somebody else is in the relationship is it doesn't make logical sense.
Exactly.
It's I think about, let's say take Scientology, for example, right? The whole belief is that there's this alien Xenu who, I don't know, people fell into like a volcano. And I mean, it's just this really far out belief system.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. You're like, well, how on earth could people get tied up into this and or wrapped up into this and lose their life savings? And I mean, it's so out there that it's not even, I mean, it just doesn't even make sense as to how somebody can get into that. But it's it just happens a little bit at a time. And um, but because other people, I think it's just kind of a universal knee-jerk reaction to get almost upset when we experience something that's illogical. It
Yeah.
just makes us mad because it doesn't make any sense, you
Right.
know? And we get frustrated. And especially if the other person is somebody we care about, we're upset that they were victimized. And
Yes.
um, so I would say kind of have your emotional shield up when you're talking to other people about that relationship. Um, and then realizing, you don't have to stand there and defend yourself. And if they keep asking questions, or if it's really pushing you over the line, it's okay to just be like, you know what, I need to switch the topic, or I just can't talk about this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I ended up, a friend of mine I kind of cut off because of my toxic mother. And when I went, it was literally my best friend on the planet. Long story. And when I went no contact with my toxic mother, a few months later, I decided I'm going to try to reach out to this friend again and see if I can reconcile the relationship. So what I did with her is I wrote a letter. It was an email, and I explained to her, "Look, this is what I've gone through in the letter." And I said, "I don't even know that I fully understood at the time exactly what I'd experienced. I know that I was just starting to research, you know, um, narcissistic personality disorder, and I started writing a few articles about it at that time. And I didn't even talk about that. I kind of did. I might have told her to look at the blog, but basically I was explaining by saying, this is how she got into my head, and this is what made me walk away from you, and I'm so sorry, and I was wrong, and so basically what I did was I explained the things that she was saying to me and why those things, and how those things got twisted in my head and why I walked away from, so my point is, this is why my relationship with you personally was affected, and I'm so sorry. And so
Mm.
I think it is important to apologize, even though, obviously you didn't necessarily choose to be manipulated. Um, and while that person might go, well, look, I specifically would never do anything like that. I would never, blah, 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 whatever. If you come to them with the right sort of, I don't want to say holding your hat in your hand, but recognizing that they too have been hurt by your pulling away is my point.
Mm-hmm.
Validating their feelings and while acknowledging your own pain, of course, but still letting them know that, hey, this is what I went through, but I'm so sorry that you were affected by it. I'm so sorry that I hurt you, et cetera, et cetera. And my friend did take me back, thank goodness. Um, and we've been friends ever since, and we were friends before. I mean, we don't even count that 2 years that I went no,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel terrible about it still a little bit every day, but not every day. But when I
Mm-hmm.
talk about it and think about it, but it's not an issue anymore for us. And yet, of course, my toxic parent is still no longer a part of my daily life. So that's something, I
Yeah.
guess.
And I think you bring up such a great point, and it is so huge to be accountable,
Yeah,
even though we weren't consciously aware that we were pulling away or that other people were hurt by it because we were just so wrapped up in the situation. But letting other people know, uh, I'm really sorry I didn't make our friendship a priority during
right.
this. You are important to me. You are a priority. This will never happen again.
Hmm.
Um, you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. It is very important. Um, just checking in the chat here. Yeah. Oh, here's an interesting thing from the chat from
Okay.
Let's Uplift Each Other. I was a member of a Unity church in Florida for years. I didn't realize how much of a cult it was until I got out. Does anyone else have this experience with Unity Church and the New Age movement? Now, I personally have not experienced that. Have you?
With the Unity Church, no, but New Age movement, yeah, I've seen a lot of really concerning stuff on YouTube, especially.
Well, I've certainly seen some stuff, but I haven't been personally affected. I thought that was when I first read it. I thought it was more more on topic.
Mhm.
But yeah, but I mean there are, and I think that the thing that cults do in general that, and I'm just going to touch on this really
Mhm.
quickly, that I think narcissists also do is they look for vulnerable people. They look for people who feel like they don't belong, or they look for people who feel like they're alone, and they promise them this, you know, this like companionship or this family, and then they control them as part of that, which is also another way you can maybe explain to someone why you got s- swept up in it,
Mhm.
um, because I even have I have a client who was going through, her husband was dying of a really horrible disease, and someone in her church started to kind of follow her around and started to love bomb her and started to, it was a man, and she thought initially, well, is he trying to like be there for me so that when this happens, I won't be alone? And she kind of, he just really struck her at a vulnerable point in her life and just sort of destroyed her systematically.
Mm.
And luckily she was able to get out of it before her husband passed, and so she could stay focused on what was important. But it's they definitely don't, because of the fact that they have no empathy. In general, narcissists will not hesitate to, in fact, I think they prefer someone vulnerable. Like when I met my ex-husband, I had just been sexually assaulted the week before.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and he, kind of came in like a a knight on a white horse or whatever, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, and tried to make me feel safe. And that was sort of what he offered me, was the feeling of being safe. And he love bombed and he did all the things. And as we all know, that didn't work out that well.
Mhm.
But I sort of felt connected because of that. Like he took that vulnerable moment in my life and jumped in on it. And, you know, I don't know. Anyway,
Mhm. Yeah. And Darlene mentions here in the chat, she says, I once heard that most cult leaders are narcissists. And I- yeah, I think there's a huge overlap.
for sure.
I would say cult leaders are either personality disordered or mentally ill, or both.
Yep.
So, because it's tends to be such grandiose behavior, such delusional
Oh
behavior.
yeah.
Um,
They
and
often compare themselves to God, or they're some kind, they're Jesus, or they're,
yep,
re- yeah,
yep, a
absolutely.
prophet, or they're somehow special, unique, and different.
Yeah.
And um, yeah, they have. It's very, very concerning. And um, two, with uh, these cults and everything, it's um, they just try to. Well, I think some of them are more intentional
Hmm.
and than others. Like for example, with I forget the guy, drawing a blank on his name, that guy that started Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah.
Um, he was on record talking about how he wanted to start a religion because it's a nonprofit and you can make millions.
I've heard that.
And it was very intentional. He was a science fiction writer, very successful science fiction writer. Like he had all the elements there and he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
Whereas but I almost think that that's kind of more the exception. I think most of them tend to have kind of just this delusional belief coupled with this grandiosity and um, a charismatic personality.
Mm,
And they just kind of tend to get followers. I mean, if you think about anybody um, who's ever been into like a multi-level marketing type company, when you think you found something that's a solution, oh my gosh, I can join, I don't know, whatever, Unique or Avon or whatever it might be nowadays, um, and make a ton of money. And it really seems like a solution. People are super gung ho. And, there's all kinds of videos lately about like LuLaRoe
yeah,
and the fall of that company and how it's just destroyed, uh, you know, probably tens of thousands of people.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And they're comparing those groups to cults, those
it's
MLMs.
the exact
Yeah,
same. And of course, the people that are in it that are trying to recruit others, they're doing it from a place of they really believe it's the solution. Like it's
right,
very well intended. And they want, and of course, whenever we think we have a solution, you want all of the people that you love to be
right.
on board. It's like, hey, I've got a hot stock tip. You
Mhm.
guys need to get in on this. Hey, I've got this solution.
Yeah.
I want to see you saved and get to heaven, right? So
Mhm.
follow me. I know the way, kind of a thing. And that's the problem. And this is kind of, I think, a good way to tell the difference too between kind of where that line is between a healthy belief system and a concerning one is what are the methods? Is there a lot of stick and carrot used
Mm.
to drive behavior? Is it the pleasure of the ultimate reward, and is it the fear of consequences? Do you have free will?
Yeah.
um can you say no, can you speak up, or is it constant anxiety and eggshells?
Yeah. I had a client a while back, and I mean, uh, years ago when I was doing social media and stuff for people, websites, things like that. And she was a high up person in one of those MLMs. And she wanted me to help her create a website and a blog and everything. And now she's coaching or something. But she was not allowed, like, she was, they were very restricted on how they were allowed to talk about the brand and where. And she
Hmm.
wasn't allowed to say the name of the brand on her personal website. There's a lot of, I mean, it's a very controlling, and this is one probably everyone's heard of, and I am not going to mention it because I'm not trying to be, you know, telling everybody's business, but, and I'm pretty sure she's still involved with that particular group, although she's now got this new side thing.
Hmm.
But it is quite interesting, because to see from the inside exactly how serious, they are about these rules.
Yep.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, here's a question in the chat, kind of off topic here, but Blue Moon asks, what is the best way to react to someone when they start pushing your buttons?
Oh, great question.
Yeah.
Um, I would say, if you feel it happening, recognize, if especially a narcissist, if they know your buttons, they're going to push them, and you're if it's your parent, they installed them, and if not, that if it's a partner, I would gray rock. I would simply just do your very best to not react to them, at least visibly or verbally. Obviously, you're going to feel annoyed, you're going to feel some kind of way about it, but I would intentionally not react, because if they keep pushing a button that doesn't work, they'll stop pushing the button eventually, and try something else. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Staying just emotionally neutral.
Hmm.
It depend like Angie's saying, it depends on if they realize that this is a button for you. Because we all have buttons and sometimes they do get pushed unintentionally.
Right.
So if the person uh if it's somebody that you know well enough to know that they're well intended, then I would just say, um, oh God, there's some giant wasp or something down here. Oh, uh, I guess I would just make it clear
Mm.
that topic,
Ooh,
uh, you just don't want to talk about it. I'd switch topics. I'd, um, just kind of assert myself in a
yeah.
way. But if you're like, ooh, this kind of feels like this person's trying to just kind of twist the knife a little bit, yeah, I just stay emotionally react neutral,
Hmm.
because if you bring it up and let them know that they're pushing your button, then they're going to keep doing it more, and then they're going to deny it, and because that's their goal, is
Right.
to stir you up, and it's working. So
It gives them
yeah.
supply.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I have a note from XOXO gloves, XOXOM gloves, saying, I'm too embarrassed what happened to me in the past that also. So I think she's talking about, let me go back up here. She's struggling with suicidal thoughts. Um, I'm trying to see what, anyway, my point that I was going to make though, I don't see, oh wait, okay. And she's still, oh, going through some really bad times.
Okay.
I would suggest a couple of things. Um, First of all, I would say don't be embarrassed about what happened to you in the past. I know that's easier said than done, but sometimes being able to um, acknowledge it, and to intentionally heal from it, first steps. You don't have to tell anyone who you don't want to tell about it, um, and recognize that is your right. You have a right to privacy. And secondly, um, I cutting is something I sadly know about. I did it in my early adulthood. I still have some scars from it, and it is not. At the time, I rationalized it in a weird way that I'm not going to say because I don't want to idealize this stuff. But it, there are just outside of the physical effects of it, right? The mental effects of it. The reason I don't even want to explain my reasoning for having done it. I don't want to, I don't want to make this something that anyone else does. It's very unhealthy, and you're hurting the wrong person here. You have been a victim of someone who has abused you, and you don't deserve any further abuse. And by continuing to beat yourself up emotionally and also physically through this behavior, you're sort of carrying on their goal or their mission in a way, if their mission was to hurt you in some way. um, I would suggest that you speak with a doctor about your feelings because you may need some help over the hump, so to speak. um, I I know when I left my ex-husband, I found myself, underwater. I couldn't breathe in certain ways, and I don't mean anything related to current events. I just mean I felt very overwhelmed by everything. I was suddenly a single mom, and I had no idea what the heck I was doing. And something that helped me was I went to my doctor, and for about 6 months I was on Prozac, and it really did help me over the hump. And once I realized that I didn't need it anymore, I asked my doctor to wean me off. And I have clients who have done and are doing similar things. I'm not recommending any sort of drugs at all. Sometimes maybe you don't need them, but it doesn't hurt to go talk to your doctor and just double check, or a psychiatrist even, if that helps to get over the hump. Because once you get over the hard part, the part where you feel like you can't get your head above water, then how do I say this? So our brains are neuroplastic, right? So right now your brain is telling you everything is terrible, and you're worthless and all these other things that aren't true. But when you begin to intentionally change those thought patterns, you can actually change the way your brain connects it to different things. And sometimes we need a little help to get to that point because we're drowning in our own negativity. And I'm not saying that I don't know if negativity is the right word, pain. We're drowning in our own pain. And so we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like the tunnel's dark, there's nothing there. I'm just drowning, right?
Hmm.
And so if you can, get a leg up, if you can have a hand to help you to that level where you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. For me, that involved Prozac. And it's not for everyone. It's not, and I don't even know that I think it's still on the market. I'm not 100% sure. But I know that it did help me for that period of time. One day I woke up a month after I started taking it. I started wearing makeup again. I didn't even mean to. It just, I started being myself again. And so, and then at the end of that 6 month period, I noticed that someone in my family passed away who I'd been close to, and I didn't have a tear for it, couldn't cry about it. And I realized, okay, I'm done now. I don't need this anymore because now I have no emotions, you know. But for that period of time where I was in so much pain, it just really helped me to be able to release, to move forward and to let go of the pain and to start to heal to the point that I needed to, and that I was able to move on. So, you have any thoughts about that?
Mhm. Um, yeah, there's a couple things. I guess if you're really feeling suicidal, I would encourage you to talk to somebody about that. At a minimum, you can Google the suicide hotline. I don't know which country you're in, if you're here in the United States or not. But most countries, many countries actually, have a suicide hotline. It's free. And you don't need, and they're open 24 hours. You don't need to wait until you're, you know, at that point where you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. If you're at this dark place, I would encourage you to consider that a viable resource. And then, or telling another trusted person I'm really in a dark place. I'm feeling I can't handle this anymore, and reaching out and getting help. So,
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
And
there's that. Mhm.
I just wanted to add, maybe you have some kind of a contract with someone close to you, your friend or a family member that you trust, that if you feel this way that you could call or you can text and they'll, some kind of, and then you promise that you won't, you promise that person maybe that you don't do it, you don't hurt yourself, and that if you feel like you're going to, you reach out to them and they support you. I mean, just a thought. I've seen that be very effective when you have someone that you can trust in your circles. And I think someone was saying this was her either daughter or I think sister. One of our regular people was saying this was her sister, so I thought I would throw that out there. Maybe your sister can be that kind of person that you touch base with to, you know if you're having a hard time and you're doubting yourself, you're feeling low, you feel like you can't make it, then maybe you reach out to her and you say, hey, help me out, sis. And just sometimes even just a regular friendly conversation can really make a big
Mhm.
difference. Yeah. I want to really quickly, Dana, I want to address something that Shasha
Sure.
says Prozac has fluorine that blocks thyroid, poisons the brain, body, and all cells. So again, I want to say this. I'm not recommending Prozac or any other drug. I'm not a doctor. I'm simply saying that during that 6 month period that I took it, it helped me because as I was in the depths of my pain, feeling like I was drowning, it helped me sort of get my my mouth to the surface. You know what I'm saying? And I mean that hypothetically. It helped me to get to the point where I could feel like I was not, like I felt devastated. I felt overwhelmed. I felt scared. I felt
Mhm.
depressed. All those, like a big failure, all those things. And I was just living in that all the time. And I didn't see a way out at the time. Now I would do something different for myself, but I don't want to recommend anything as far as, I mean, there are a lot of things you could do. You can use pattern interrupt. You can do a lot of things, but I didn't understand all that back then. I was what, 23 years old, I think, and I was a single mom. All of a sudden, like so I was just spinning, and it helped me stop spinning. And again,
Mhm.
not recommending it, just saying talk to your own doctor. And I'm sure there are better things out there. I'm 45 now, so it's been 22 years or something since that experience, but it did help me. That's all I'm saying. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely think there's a time and place for medication.
Hmm.
Um, if a person's if you're struggling, and if it's lasting longer than 2 weeks, if it's which for most of us, we're like, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me." Yeah, it's time to go seek some professional help.
And there's nothing wrong
So,
with doing that.
not at
Don't,
all.
yeah.
Yep.
And and let me just say another thing. There are holistic doctors out there. If you don't want to take a medication, you'd rather use herbs or whatever, make sure you're checking on their qualifications, but they're out there and sometimes they have some really good stuff that can help you in one way or the other. And
Mhm.
just don't don't think it makes you weak to get help if you need help.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah. It makes you strong actually. So, yes.
Right. And here's another question. This is from George or George Ann, who says, what is the best way to help another person to go to a shelter? She is definitely trauma bonded.
This is a tough one. Can I just really quickly touch on
Yeah,
it?
go for it.
Here's what it is. Until she's ready, she's not going. And if you try to force her into it, she's probably going to hate your guts and not and cut off contact or something similar to that. If she's ready to go, that's a different story. The unfortunate thing about these relationships is, as Dana mentioned earlier, it's very much like you're in a cult. And so the idea of leaving can be very scary because you have bought into she has bought into whatever this person is doing, or even if she is complaining about what this person is doing to you, which is a start, she just might not be ready to go yet. And as much as I would like to tell you here are some steps you can take to get there, it all comes down to you have to make her see that going to a shelter would actually be better than what she's dealing with now. And that's very difficult. I've seen people do it. One person in particular comes to mind right now who she's been a long time follower and she's been through hell and back. But she left and went to a shelter in a different state and she really started her whole life over and she's doing great now. But those examples are not always
Mhm.
available, and they don't always hit a person the right way. If she has kids, there's that to worry about. I mean, so my suggestion is to continue to listen to her, and when you hear an opening, start to put the idea in her head, but understand that putting a woman in a shelter, it's she has to be willing. That's all. What are your thoughts, Dana?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. She's gotta be willing and, you know, going most it's been my experience that most people that go to a shelter tend to not stay in there for very long
Right.
because it's its own set of challenges. Not to intimidate or turn anybody off to the idea, but it's communal living, right? So there's anywhere from like, I don't know, 6 to 26 people there, or 0 to 26. It depends on how full they are, but generally there's a handful of other people there that have their own issues.
Mhm.
And it's a lot to take on. So you have a bunch of um, strangers in a house that all have different parenting styles, that have different ways of interacting, different manners, different um, belief systems, all of that. So um, I would say I would encourage her to find or to start building up a positive support system. um, that's been shown to be like the number one thing that keeps people from going back to
Mhm.
problematic situations is kind of getting a solid footing into something that's better for them. So because it's I mean, you think about it, it'd be difficult for any one of us if we're going from um, the frying pan into the fire kind of a thing, or you're making a massive change. You're
Mhm.
going from an abusive relationship, but it's still predictable because even though it's unpredictable, it's predictably unpredictable. You know what to expect. You know what eggshells to walk on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To a totally new environment, um, that's a shelter or moving out on their own. Most of us don't respond that well to change, and there's kind of that shock to the system of maybe I was better off in the frying pan kind of
Yeah.
a thing.
The wolf you
And
know versus the one you don't.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So if if she can start interacting with people that have similar hobbies, or even some sort of support group like domestic abuse or narcissistic abuse type support group, that can really help her be kind of more anchored into something, into the next chapter in her life, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I know Dana and I both have support groups on Facebook and I have
Hmm.
other places. And the thing about that is that what happens is when you get into a group like that, you start to see, okay, somebody's like, oh, I'm finally getting my divorce, or oh, I'm finally going, I'm leaving now. Oh, I finally got my own place. And you start to realize that it's possible and that life can go on in positive ways beyond where you're at. I think that's important. And another thing I wanted to note for people who are new around here is that Dana you worked in a shelter in the past, right? A domestic violence shelter
Yeah, I've worked in two actually.
too.
Hmm.
So she knows what she's talking about here.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, um, Yeah, I have a good question from, oh darn it, it just scrolled up on me. From Christina. Hold on, let me see if I can. Oh boy, I thought I'd try to find it. Here it goes. Okay, Gamer Christina. How can you tell yourself you are worthy when coworkers ignore you, cut you off in the middle of your sentences, and do not include you on information? All coworkers affirm I am not worthy of respect. What would you say to Christina?
Have you mentioned this to them when they cut you off? Like what do you say when that happens? And what do
Yeah,
you mean that they've affirmed that you're not worthy of respect?
that's a good question. And I would add, how do you feel about yourself? Like, do you think you're not worthy of respect? Because the reason I ask that is that a lot of times, some some people, our experiences reflect our attitude or our mental our perception of ourselves. And so if we think, gosh, I'm just, or if we believe, even if we don't think it, sometimes we believe things we don't even admit to ourselves. Um, and if you've been with a narcissist in the past, well, that just makes sense that you might feel like you're not worthy. Um, but if it's a toxic work environment and you can't get through to them, you can't change how they're treating you. I mean, I would definitely talk to HR if there is such a department in your company. I would, do what you can do. But also, people, a lot of people will walk on you until, or overstep your boundaries until you set them straight. And then sometimes decent people will stop, that. So it's, that's my only
Mm-hmm.
addition to that. Yeah. I would say there, you say they all affirm that I'm not worthy of respect. I would start telling yourself I'm completely worthy of respect, just like everyone else. And I would start changing your internal narrative and expecting to be treated with respect. And what you'll notice is that when you recognize, hey, I actually am worthy, just as worthy as everyone else, you will get this feeling of almost indignation when somebody treats you in a way that you don't deserve. And then you start to stand up for yourself. But it all starts in your head with your ability to believe that you are worthy of respect, in my opinion. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so many of us take take the crap for way too long. I mean, I even have to remind myself sometimes, like, don't take that, and stand up for yourself. And then as you, the more you do it, the more it becomes a habit, and that neural connection changes, and you stop thinking I'm not worthy. You start realizing I'm so worthy. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really what it boils down to is you've really got to fully believe that you are worthy of respect and being respected by other
Yes.
people, that being treated respectfully by other people. And if they're not treating you respectfully, that's not a reflection of you and your worth. It's a reflection of them and their bad manners.
Exactly.
So we don't need to, I know it can be difficult to not take that stuff in, but if you see it as a reflection of them, it's a lot easier. If you can avoid people like that, I mean, I think we've all had, difficult coworkers. Like there tends to be one in every environment, at least.
Yeah.
Um, it's just not worth the headache and to kind of steer clear of them. But um, if it's everybody, then I would be curious. I think it has, but I don't mean this in a blaming way, but I think there's more going on with your boundaries and um, how you're approaching other people and how you're asserting yourself. If it was one or two, I would say jerky kind of coworkers. If it's everybody, there's more going on there.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
probably more of like an unconscious way that you're presenting yourself and interacting with others.
right. I mean, unless all the people come from the same family or something.
Right.
you know, other
Right,
than
right.
that, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a question for us, Dana?
This is a comment from Fatima who says, I keep telling my sister that others' opinions don't define her, but she keeps taking things very hard and personal.
It's
And
hard.
mhm.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this kind of just follows along with what we were just talking about. And I guess there's two things that I wanted to say about that. The first is, ask yourself, like, would you take advice from these people? Odds are no. Odds are they're jerks, right? So if you wouldn't, like, don't take criticism from somebody you wouldn't take advice from,
Yep.
for starters. And then second, it really is important, and it's completely possible. This is what healthy self-esteem does. Healthy self-esteem allows for a person to keep their hurt feelings and self-worth in two different buckets.
Yeah.
So when people do hurtful, rude things, and it's going to happen because this is life, um, it's important that we can keep that in the hurt feelings bucket. Like with Gamer Christina, coworkers being insensitive, rude, kind of walking all over her, hurt feelings bucket. Not okay, not cool. It doesn't have to spill over into her self-worth.
Yeah.
And it's really important that we have a solid sense of that self-worth and realize that we have value regardless of whether or not other people see it.
Exactly.
And we for sure can't turn over that value ever, but especially to abusive people, because if they're not going to, these are not the people to be taken, feedback from in any way, shape, or form, because they're abusive and they have their own issues that are going to always come out and spill over onto other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that same note, Fatima also adds, I think XOXO needs to learn trauma bonding. And so, that's a valid point. Um, Maybe you're still in the trauma bonding stuff, which is essentially very similar to Stockholm syndrome. So your abuser becomes, you sort of become attached to them in unhealthy ways. And this is especially true, I think, when we're talking about a romantic partnership, but also in parent-child relationships, and just about any relationship can make you feel trauma bonded. And of course, the term originates from, or the Stockholm syndrome thing is basically the same thing, and that's where kidnappers and other people who take people away from their homes and hostage situations, things like that, where you become emotionally attached to that person who is actively abusing or hurting or detaining you in ways that you don't want. um, I saw a movie once about that, and the example was this, I don't remember the name of the movie, but this man, his wife was kidnapped and he was told she was dead. And later he found out that she wasn't dead. It's a long story and I won't go into it all, but basically he found her wedding ring at a pawn shop and hunted down the person who put it in the pawn shop. And long story short, figured out that she and a whole bunch of other women were being kept in this like barn situation. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it was real bad. And she, was essentially like an intimacy slave. I'll say it that way for YouTube.
Mhm.
Um, but and she was being used in that way. And when her husband found her, she was like, "No, it's my turn to sit in the house and watch TV. You can't take me yet," because she was so trauma bonded that she was like literally brainwashed into thinking that going and watching TV and then going back to the barn was better than leaving with her husband. It had been like 8 years or something. Long story short, her husband ended up killing the man, and who had kidnapped her and taking her, and she then killed her husband because she was so trauma bonded that she couldn't even remember loving him because she was so, you know what I mean? So that's an extreme, obviously an extreme example. But the idea being that you can develop those feelings of attachment to someone who abuses you and hurts you in various ways, whether it's physically or otherwise. Dana, I know you have some good input on that as well. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I think you covered all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So definitely look into the trauma bonding thing. And one of the things you want to do to sort of extricate yourself is, I think, first to recognize what this is and why you're feeling maybe you're missing someone who abused you, and maybe missing that person is causing you more harm than good. Well, if you are trauma bonded, which it sounds like you might be, according to your sister, there is there's a big there's a lot of things you can do to recover, but the first thing is to educate yourself about it, and then start to like a scientist, recognize, okay, I feel this way because of this trauma bond, and I'm missing this person because of this trauma bond. I believe this person's lies about me because of this trauma bond, and then start to use pattern interrupts. But again, educate yourself and then change your mind from there. Anything else on that? Do you have another
Mhm.
question for us?
Um, no, I think that's great. I am.
It's her parents. Her parents
Mhm,
are abusing her. Um, that's what Fatima says. What were you going to say?
mhm. Uh, yeah, this is difficult. I guess if we're talking about I don't know your age. If you and your sister are under 18, you could consider getting child protective services involved. So that's a thought as well. Um, and they normally will try to see if you could go to other family or a family friend. Uh, but that would be something.
I'm trying to see if she's telling. Fatima, let us know, how old are you guys, or how old is your sister? Um, she said she did call a national abuse domestic hotline. Oh goodness.
Okay.
Okay, Fatima's 18 and XOXO is only 13. Fatima, did they, when you called that hotline? Oh, they did give you resources. Okay, can we? And said she's a minor and still can't leave. Are you guys in the United States? Can you let us know? Um, it is it's a hairy situation, and it's very difficult for us to advise people under 18. Um, but I will tell you, as a mom of a girl who is 12 right now, and a boy who's 16, and so on and so forth, you don't deserve to be abused, and you don't deserve that treatment. And also, as a former child of those types of parents, I can tell you that you're not alone, and there's a lot of kids out there going through something similar.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, if you're not being, they are in the United States. Good. Okay. If you're not being physically abused, it's going to be a little bit harder um, to get CPS to see it. Uh, and depending on your community and all of that, I mean, there's a lot of issues, but um,
Yeah.
it's very hard.
I,
Yeah.
I would encourage you, XOXO, well, both of you, Fatima and XOXO, to look up your local domestic violence shelter and to call them and then let them know. You don't have to, give specifics or anything, but just say, here's the situation. I've got a younger sister. She's 13. She's being abused at home. Um,
They are physically abused and they have audio evidence.
okay.
Definitely go to CPS,
Yeah,
without
CPS,
question.
if you call the shelter, they'll
Hmm.
be able to connect you. They will either hopefully have a child counselor that they'll be able to connect you with, or the manager
Hmm.
there, and they'll be able to help connect you with resources about who to talk to and what's next. And somebody had mentioned in the chat, yeah, Darlene,
Mm.
great point. She said, Fatima, if you were able to get out and if CPS takes your sister, they may possibly give you custody because you're 18. And that is a possibility. So these would all be questions that I would call the shelter with,
Well,
and
yeah.
and see, because they'll be able to walk you through all of that. They might even be able to call CPS and have you meet them
Yeah.
at the shelter, or lots of different things. But any questions you have, any concerns, anything, that's what they're there for at these shelters. So they're wonderful advocates, and they care.
Yeah.
So
Two more things, really quickly.
mhm.
Fatima, let us know. Do you have your own place? Are you out of the house? And XOXO says, I'm afraid CPS will separate me from my sister. Um, okay. Okay. Fatima says, I can't drive. The shelters I called said they don't provide transportation. Two things. First of all, it is possible. I'm not going to lie to you. It's possible that they'll separate you. But Darlene's point is also valid, and it's possible that they might let her come and live with you if you can afford that. Um, Not being able to drive, use Uber. if you can. If you have a phone to talk to us right now, you can put the Uber app on your phone, and hopefully, you know, the shelter might even help pay for it, or might
Mhm.
work it out with you. In fact, I mean, how far is the shelter from where you're at? Let us know, because I mean, I might even be able to help cover that personally, because I don't think anyone should be abused physically, especially. But anyway, in
Mhm.
any way, yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
And I would say too, for you guys to call the shelter and talk to them and say, here's what and work on a plan.
hmm,
So, okay, we need to find a way to get there. I'm 18, I don't drive. We're being abused. What are the options? If we take a bus, what bus could you help us figure out which bus to take? If we take an Uber, can you figure out how to help us figure out how to pay for this?
yeah,
Um, if these are the other concerns we have is if CPS is involved, I'm afraid that they're going to separate us, and I'm afraid of the unknown. Where what if my sister goes, to some strangers or something? I'm scared of that. What are the options?
mhm,
Uh, what are some things that we could consider? Like, what would the next steps be? And they should be able to walk you through that. If they're not much help, I would see if they have a counselor there that you can talk to, and the counselor should be able to give you some more feedback. And I think you're wise for wanting to leave when no one is home. That's that is a good plan. So
yeah,
it's going to be coming up with the rest of the plan. You could even consider calling non-emergency police and um, talking to them and just saying, you know what, I don't want to, um, I just want to be vague about this, but this is kind of the situation. And you could just say it's for a friend if you don't
yeah.
want them to, I've got a friend who's being abused. She needs a ride to a shelter. What are some ideas, and brainstorm with non-emergency police.
Mm. Yeah, that's actually really smart. And a lot of police stations, I mean, I'm not sure where you live, but a lot of them actually have like a victim advocate, or a person who is specifically there to help victims of
Yeah.
abuse and other things. So, yeah. Um, XOXO says, my question is that my parents get me all worked up and I don't know how to react, which also gives me thoughts if I should keep living there. Narcissistic. I think she said this much earlier, but I want to throw this in because, um, again, I would suggest that you study and practice the gray rock method with them. I would literally just, if you can get away with not responding, okay. But if you do respond, do your best to keep your face straight and don't let them see your emotions or hear them in your voice. Respond only as necessary to your parents. So if they ask you a question, you respond. Otherwise, say nothing. Just nod and act like okay, or whatever you do. Um, Make sure that if one of them or both of them are really truly narcissistic and they're abusing you, um, anything to avoid being abused, which is very often to not react to the lies they tell you about yourself, and to recognize that in fact they're saying what they're saying as a reflection of their own inadequacies, not yours. But regardless of that, what we're talking about is, yes, get out of the house. Yes, call the shelter. Yes, call CPS. Be careful. Uh, I would definitely involve CPS on some level, because of being only 13. The default, knee jerk reaction is they'll send you back unless you have some, which you have evidence. So use that to get safe. And even if you
Hmm.
look, if you can get to the police station or have the police come to your home when your parents are gone and let them hear that piece of evidence, they'll probably take you right then and drive you to the shelter or to somewhere
Hmm.
and get you help. I mean, it's a big step and it's a scary step, but you can't you can't live with constantly being abused. And Fatima, you're
Right.
brave. Fatima is brave to even bring this to us, and so are you, XOXO. So, but you've got to talk to somebody in a position of authority and that
Yep.
can help you. Yeah.
Yeah, and XOXO says, yeah, Fatima's called a domestic violence line and said it was about a friend and then called the Children's and Family Services line, but we just don't know where to go after that. I I would tell them that. So when you call, so one of the things that you could do ahead of time is to write out all of the questions that are swimming around in your head. Well, what would happen if I were to get separated from my sister? Well, would we have to try to prove any and all questions that you have, write them down.
Mhm.
And so the next time, so when you do call, um, a a local shelter, domestic violence shelter, you're able to say, um, give the information that you're going to give, and then say, we know we need to leave. We don't know how, and we don't know how to go about doing this. Can you help us come up with a plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And something else I just wanted to mention is
Mhm.
there are certain people in the world who are mandated reporters, right? Your doctor, your teachers, your school counselor. Who else, Dana? Who's mandated reporters? Um,
Uh, well, generally,
Nurses.
people at a domestic violence shelter
Well, of
are,
course. Right.
um, most people with licenses.
Right. If you
So, yeah.
your pastor even, or minister, or religious person, official, anybody, tell someone, if you're scared to do it yourself, tell someone confidentially, your teacher or your school counselor or your doctor or someone else, that they are mandated by law to report any child abuse. And so if you tell them and you let them hear the tape, uh, they might just handle it for you, um, if you're too afraid to do it yourself. Just something to think about. So,
Hmm. Yeah, XOXO says, I try to get my head up and even try to make jokes about the abuse, but it gets to me so often since I'm so sensitive. And you know what? I wouldn't even say that's sensitive. It's completely understandable if you're being abused to have a problem with being abused.
yes,
And to,
normal, healthy.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Normal and healthy. It's normal and healthy to be angry and upset and hurt and scared and sad and mad and all of that.
yes.
So, but it's concerning that if you're feeling suicidal, um, yeah, some sort of action needs to be taken. Um,
Yeah. Don't give up on yourselves. Um, yep.
yeah. Fatima, um, if you want to shoot me an email, um, go to Dana at thriveafterabuse.com, and you're going to get an auto response email, but just put in there Fatima so I know who it is. So I'll keep my eye open for it, and I'll see if I can help you guys to kind of tag team this. Okay.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. How are we doing on time? Looks like we have time for maybe another question if you want,
Okay.
Dana.
Okay.
Do you have one or should I find one? I think
Uh, I don't have one.
I had one a minute ago. Okay, here it goes.
Okay.
Spiritual Goddess of Enlightenment, great name, by the way, um, says, I'm planning to go no contact. I'm going through a grieving process already while living with my mom and father. I'm really scared to go no contact, but I want to as an act of self-love. My body just gets panicky about it. Any advice? Um, yes. This is one of those times you're going to have to do it even though you're scared. Um, I can tell you from my own experience that it is scary as heck to go no contact, but once you've done it and you've stuck to your guns, there's this huge weight lifted from your chest and your shoulders and wherever else it happens to manifest in your own body. That I felt this. Certainly, it took some time. I had to grieve, and you're grieving now, and that's pretty normal, because you're really grieving for the person you thought they were and not the person they actually are. And whether this is true, whether it's your parents or a partner, um, but once you're going to go through that. But once you kind of realize, oh my gosh, I don't have to concern myself with for example, a choice I'm going to make. If I wear a red dress or a blue dress, am I gonna be attacked? Or whatever. I'm just making that up, that choice up.
Mhm.
But I used to constantly worry about my choices being challenged and judged and everything else. That's why all of my children have two middle names. Um,
Mm.
it's a long story, but anyway, point being, you got to just remind yourself why. I would suggest at this point that you write yourself a note or a list of all the reasons that you want to go no contact, and keep it in a drawer just in case you ever doubt yourself. So you can go back and look at it again. But in general, I say move forward despite the fear. The fear is, in this case, it's that part of you, like we kind of talked about before. Change is really hard for humans, and the
Mhm.
idea of the wolf you don't know might be scarier than the one you do. But in this case, not so much. Dana, thoughts?
Yeah. And who is the person she's wanting to go no contact from?
She doesn't, I don't know if she said, let me double check. Hold on. Let me see if I
Okay.
can find her original comment. Oh, can't type. Here we go. Hi, planning to go no contact. Hold on. I'm not seeing. Okay, wait.
Is it with a partner?
I can't, she doesn't say. If you're
Okay.
still here, spiritual goddess, let us know. I love that name.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Uh,
She doesn't say. Wait, mom and dad. Oh, yeah. Okay, I did that too. Yeah. So with that being said, let me add this. Those are the people that I went no contact with, where I was feeling just like you're feeling. Um, and bottom line, my suggestion is do exactly what I just said. Do it anyway. While you're living there, write down the things, write down the pain, start making your plan to leave. I assume that you're over 18, and if you're not, please do use legal channels for help, because that's that's going to get you in more trouble than just if you were under if you are over 18. Anyway, Dana, thoughts?
yeah, I agree. I like writing out the list. One of the challenging things, the added challenge that people have when they go no contact with family or parents versus a partner is, with a partner, you tend to move on, you tend to find a different partner.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily like this permanent loss. Whereas when it's a parent, it is. And so it's a different type of like grieving process. So I guess preparing yourself emotionally as much as you can, and realizing, like Angie was saying, that there's going to be kind of these highs and lows emotionally with that, and it can help to go back and read this list as to why.
Yeah.
But also realizing that other people are probably not going to be supportive of your decision.
Right.
So kind of coming up with, how are you going to explain this to other people, and how are you not going to let their response, how are you going to stay grounded in your approach and not get pulled off track by kind of well-intended people who don't know the full situation.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Very good.
Yes.
Um, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Good show. So with that said, you guys, thank you so much. We will see you next Tuesday. 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We normally go for about an hour, hour and a half. And we'll be over on Angie's channel next week. So Angie Atkinson on YouTube and across the interwebs. Uh, Angie, thank you so much for being here as always.
Always my pleasure.
Yes, good deal. And take care, guys. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.